Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we're diving into the works of Mr. Aleister Crowley. This is going to be the introduction and the groundwork video. We will be reading aloud the wiki and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people will find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book where I teach you to do magic responsibly, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. But in addition to that, and before we dive in, I'm going to give a brief reintroduction of me because there will undoubtedly be new eyes that come into this video. My name is Jeremy Pittman. I go by Pitt. I have been Pitt since I was knee-high to a pissant. When I was in kindergarten, there was 3 Jeremys, and I got designated by my last name. By the time I was in 2nd grade, it had been shortened from Pittman into Pitt. And I have been that most of my life. And it's not a name I gave myself. It's not something I chose for me. It is something that other people gave me because it was easy. And I just kind of rolled with it. And so I have been Pitt for a very long time. The only people that call me by any other name are my parents, my children, and my wife. Everybody that really knows me calls me by Pitt. I am someone who has been a student of the divine and magical practices for a very long time. I have a video that is the origin story where I outline my story of coming up from some rather horrific events through life and finding the alchemical gold as an adult. The process is outlined in some detail in the variety of videos that I've done on this channel. One of the things that we do over here is an exploration of magic, because I wrote a book on how I literally healed myself using the magic, right? The electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit, which you have access to, I have access to. It is a birthright. It is not something that should be condemned by any of the control systems, which are religions and governments, right? What you can do intrinsically for yourself, you should be able to do without fear of threat of retribution or punishment. I've done a Bible study where we discovered that there is not a lot in the Bible that is reliable. We have done several different esoterica studies where we have discovered that not much in esoterica is very reliable. Most of the things are directly contradictory to themselves. There are several things that are absolutely ridiculous, many things that are prohibitive on purpose, and several different items that have been deliberately obfuscating, right? Covering it up, not making it clear. I'm here to clarify, and make things as available as I possibly can. I am going to be talking about Mr. Crowley. I'm going to be talking about his works in the next videos, but today we will be reviewing his life, because one of the ways that you can tell whether a magician is actually doing correctly is by the fruit that they bear. We saw with Mr. Levi, Eliphas Levi, if you were unaware, we did a study on Mr. Levi and we discovered that he was full of shit. He was absolutely deceitful every single step along the way. He was quite deliberately obfuscating the subject matter. I got a feeling that we're going to be getting somewhat of the same energy from Mr. Crowley. I have not done a deep dive in him, but as far as I'm aware, he is the guy that came up with the whole "do as thou wilt," and I hate that. There are many reasons why, the 8 laws of creation being one of the fundamental reasons. There are limitations to manifestation. That is another one of the videos that I did where we discussed that in some great detail. But one of the things that is the natural outflow of actually doing these things in the correct way is that you have a beneficial life. People come to you for advice. You have a settled home life, right? The fruits of the spirit are yours. You don't have disharmony. There's not a propensity for drug abuse. There's not a propensity for sexual activities. And I got a feeling that we may be seeing a little bit something about that too. So I'm here introducing myself as someone who has healed himself, right? I asked God for healing, and he showed me how to do it myself. He has instructed me that I have to instruct you, and so I wrote a book. And so we do all of these videos. Now, the particulars of the healing situation. When I began this channel, I had a cyst in my throat. It pushed against my vocal cords and did not allow them to operate in the correct manner. I started this channel in part as vocal therapy. It was not until I fully embraced the path that I am on, this current system of magical use, that the cyst disappeared. Now, my vocal cords are not quite up to strength. They are slowly working their way up, but they were pressed for about 3 years, and it stretched them to where it's taking a lot of work to get them right. And I might be able to force that magically, but one of the things that I have learned is that you do not force things magically. But through this path and the electromagnetic manipulation of the Holy Spirit, I have learned how to heal myself, and I have healed my throat. In addition to that, I had shoulder surgery on this 20 years ago, and I didn't have full use of my shoulder. I have healed that. I now have full use of my shoulder. In addition to that, I was in a car wreck in 2011, and it severely injured my back, and I was in severe pain for almost 15 years, right? And nowadays, I'm not. Now, that is not to say that that in particular is healed, because I do not have the scientific evidence. I have not gone back in for an MRI. I'm not about to spend $600 to find out something that I already know, right? But I have been healed in that way too. I am able to do things that I was not able to do 3 years ago. All of that is to say that I am at least an adept in the magical practices. I am one of the few people who will be out here actively and openly telling you how I do it and why I do it and all of the things attached to it free of charge. Now, this book costs money. The link is down below if you are interested, but there's also a membership that you can join for a much cheaper price, and I read the book to the members, right? That is one of the things that is there. The Esoterica and the Infinite Integrations playlist contain most of the resources that are in the book. You can get them for free. You just got to slog through and do it. I am here to be open and honest about the magical practices, and one of the things that we have discovered as we've been doing these Esoterica playlists is that most of the people who are authorities are not. And that is as simple as some of them perform ceremonial magic even with results, but they were not exactly the results they were intending to get in many cases. It was not effective in many more cases. It was downright ineffective for several of them. We have witnessed through the writings of people that they practice magic that they don't even believe in. That is the Masonic organization in its entirety, right? Now, in its entirety is a big word. There is bound to be somebody in there that actually does believe in the magic, but as a group, they really don't. They perform the magic. They do not understand it. They are still performing the ceremonies. There's still energetic investment, but you're not getting the results that you thought you would get. And that is because you are doing it wrong. Right? Now, I say that with the full caveat that I can be wrong. I have confirmation bias as much as anyone else. It is entirely possible that I have healed myself through psychosomatic effects. Maybe the placebo effect really did affect me, right? These are things that must be taken into consideration, but I do have the results, right? I do have the healing that I've effected within my own body, and it is quite extensive. I have the fruits of the Spirit. That is one of the things that we have found lacking in most of the people who have been writing about this, because this subject tends to bring some of the people who are a lot less stable than they should be, right? This is a pursuit that leads to some stability if you were doing it right, but in order to investigate it, you got to be a little bit unbalanced. And so if you are looking for this, then you have a propensity to be a little bit over the top about some things, and that is what we have seen repeatedly. We have seen several people doing sex magic. We've seen people doing blood magic, and those things are absolutely terrible. They will not do the effects that you expect them to do. And I think that's going to about cover what we need to cover here. Again, I do have resources available. If you were interested in my story, it is the origin story. If you were interested in the esoteric, it is the esoterica playlist. If you are interested in how I have done these things for myself, it is the infinite integrations playlist. Or join for membership and I will read you the book. I have been as open and honest as I possibly can. I have tried to be as clear as possible, and if I'm not clear, I will take care of that in future editions with feedback. And so, all of that to say, now we are going to dive into Aleister Crowley, and I am most certainly going to piss somebody off with this. Before you come at me with any of the ists, right? Racist, sexist, any of those ists, you might want to go and check out some of the other playlists before you come at me thinking that I'm coming at this from Christianity point of view and I am just shitting on him for that. You might want to check out the Bible study, right? That didn't go the way that anybody thought it would go. It wound up in a completely different place where we kind of discredited everything in there. We have done several studies dealing with esoterica where we have discredited many things that are in there. And I fully expect this is going to go the exact same direction. So if you're interested, tag along as we continue or begin our exploration of Aleister Crowley. One thing that I will say that I have said before, and we're about to read it, right? Anyone who changes their name legally is hiding from something. They are avoiding something. They are trying to dodge something. There is some shadiness in their life. So anyone that was born one name and they go a different name, and now that is with a caveat, right? That's why I started with Pitt, because that's not a name I gave myself. It's not a legal appellation. I haven't gone and changed anything. I call myself that. Other people call me that, but my name is still Jeremy Pittman. It will be that until I die. I am not going to take on some pseudonym twice trying to hide who I am. Now, let's dive into Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley, born Edward Alexander Crowley, was an English occultist, ceremonial magician, poet, novelist, mountaineer, and painter. Okay, I skipped the birthday, right? He was from 1875 to 1947, so the period of time that we are looking for is just after the Civil War and all the way up until the end of World War I is when he was alive. There were great scientific advances taking place. We were in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. We were dealing with steam. We were getting railroads. Telephones were popping up. We got brand new cars in the 1900s. We got planes. We got flight. We got travel in all of the ways, right? Great advancements during his lifetime. So it was a time of great transition that is going to lead itself towards people exploring in ways that may or may not be beneficial to their life. But I do like to set the time frame whenever we do these, right? Rudolf Steiner was from the mid-1800s until right around World War I. Aleister Crowley is from the end of the Civil War until the end of World War II. So that when we're going through, we can contextualize where they were with science, where they were with education, where they were with social programs, so we can contextualize the entire thing. We'd like to know when it was. All right. He founded the religion of Thelema, identifying himself as the prophet. That's always a good thing. When somebody identifies themselves as a prophet, you can pretty much guarantee that they are telling you the truth. Like, I have things that I tell you, but I would not call myself a prophet. I do not see the future. I can make guesses about the future. I have had visions where I have made guesses about the future, but that does not make me a prophet in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. I do not speak directly for the Lord God Almighty himself at all. I do not have the power to call down fire and burn an altar or any person. I am not a prophet. Identifying himself as the prophet entrusted with guiding humanity into the eon of Horus. All right, we're going to have to do Thelema and Horus before we get into Liber 4, I think. Because if he created a whole religion, we're going to have to talk about that. And I'm fairly positive that the Liber 4 and 7 are actually for this religion, so it's probably going to be a good idea to at least get the background. It won't be today, it'll probably be tomorrow. But we'll probably do Thelema and the Eon of Horus. Began in 1904. The name of the current astrological age. Really? One of the 12 in the great year. Oh boy, we're going to have fun with this one, aren't we? Yes, indeed. All right. A prolific writer, he published widely over the course of his life. That does not mean that he published anything with any value, right? We have seen from Mr. Levi, if nobody else threw me off of these writers, Levi did. Eliphas Levi was a completely deceptive person, right? Everything that he was talking about, he did not believe in at all. He was relaying things that he heard without any confirmation at all. And so he really threw me off of these prolific writers. There are many of them who have read a lot of things, but that does not mean those things are accurate. And if you don't know what I'm talking about there, fall back to the very last study we did that we did not finish, right? Mr. Rudolf Steiner and his outline of occult science, which was just complete bullshit all the way through. And so, once again, just because it's written down does not make it correct. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about there, fall back to the Bible study. Born to a wealthy family in Royal Leamington Spa, Warwickshire, Crowley rejected his parents' fundamentalist Christian Plymouth Brethren faith to pursue an interest in Western esotericism. The Plymouth Brethren was a rather strict sect of the religious systems. I believe they started in Ireland. He was educated at Trinity College at the University of Cambridge, where he focused his attention upon mountaineering and poetry, because that is absolutely something that you should go to college to get a degree in. Mountaineering and poetry, that's going to pay great dividends in your life, resulting in several publications. And that, again, does not necessarily mean anything, right? I write poetry. I do. I write, and they're on the channel, right? I have some spoken word poetry that I've written. I've got songs that I have written, and I didn't have to go to school to do that. But college is more about getting to know people. It is more about the networks and the actual knowledge that you attain, at least in the current iteration of it. Some biographers allege that he was recruited into a British intelligence agency, further suggesting that he remained a spy throughout his life. I would be very interested to know if that is true, but there is probably no foundation for that. I mean, we have seen that with other people as well. I believe it was Mead that they were trying to say was, no, it was White, right? It was Arthur White that they were saying was a spy. In 1898, he joined the Esoteric Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, where he was trained in ceremonial magic by Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers and Alan Bennett. He went mountaineering in Mexico with Oscar Eckstein before studying Hindu and Buddhist practices in India. In 1904, he married Rose Edith Kelly and they honeymooned in Cairo, Egypt, where Crowley wrote down the Book of the Law, a sacred text that serves as the basis for Thelema, which he said had been dictated to him by a supernatural entity named Awis. We've seen that before too. We didn't do the study of it, but you know where else we've seen a supernatural entity dictating things for people? Mormonism. And John Smith just completely made up a whole story about how he got some golden tablets and translated them, and then they got taken away from him, and then the translation got messed up, and they asked him to translate it again, and he messed up that, and yet they still founded a religion based upon him, because, you know, he told them that an angel told him this, and that he read it in a golden tablet with no evidence whatsoever. Nobody else ever saw them or anything like that, and it was just the wildest story, right? I'm sure this is completely different from that. I'm sure that this Mr. Iwas, this supernatural entity named Iwas, I'm sure that that is completely different than, you know, John Smith and his made-up shit. The book announced the start of the Aeon of Horus and declared that its followers should do what thou wilt, yeah, fuck you, and seek to align themselves with their true will via the practice of ceremonial magic. I say that because I do not know that there is anything that has done more damage to esoterica than that particular phrase. For real, like, if you want a way to harvest negative karma in abundance, do what thou wilt. Give in to all of your desires. Go and be sexually promiscuous. Go and do that. You will get fruit, but it will be bitter and rotten. Go out there and be gluttonous. Go out there and be prideful. Go out there and be slothful. Do these things. Right? See what your fruit will be. Do what you will, because that is your nature. Your nature is to be sedentary. Right? For most people. There are a few people who really like the activity, but most people would rather sit on the couch and watch Netflix. Right? That's so beneficial for your life. It works so well to bring value into your life. Right? That is what you will. Right? Eat all of the things. It doesn't cause diabetes if you have too much sugar. You won't get fat and not able to go anywhere. That's a lie. That's a myth. Do what you will. Right? And that's not even diving into affecting other people's free will because you want to, right? Because that is definitely part of do what thou wilt. Go ahead. You don't like your neighbor? Cast a hex on them. I'm sure that will work out just fine. You don't like your other neighbor, right? And bring a curse down upon their heads. I'm sure that will be just fine. Perform blood magic. Spend your own vital force energy to produce negative effects for someone else. I'm sure that will cause no problems whatsoever, right? Right? Yeah, fuck you and your do what thou wilt. Right? I told you I'm going to piss people off with this one, and this is one that I'm intentionally doing it, right? I don't normally do that. I'm normally pretty respectful, but this guy. After the unsuccessful 1905 Kanchenjunga expedition and a visit to India and China, Crowley returned to Britain, where he attracted attention as a prolific author of poetry, novels, and occult literature. In 1907, he and George Cecil Jones co-founded an esoteric order, the A. The A Delta. What is even the name of that? Let's see if they give us an actual name, or if it's just a magical organization. Institutions are syncretic. You can find the essence of Theravada Buddhism and Vedantic yoga and ceremonial magic. Based upon the Kabbalistic tree of life, that's automatically going to be a win, right? Because anything based upon Judaism has to intrinsically be true. Unless you actually read the book, and then you realize. So no, there is no name, right? It is AA. How do you fucking How do you even mention it, right? Do you say A 3 dots, A 3 dots? Is it A Delta? What is it? This is exactly what I would expect to see from someone who was trying to do these things, though. Absolutely, right? Let's just come up with this esoteric seeming thing, even if there may not be anything for it. The A Delta. I'm going to say Delta because that is a triangle, and a triangle is a delta. Through which they propagated Thelema, which we will probably be doing. After spending time in Algeria in 1912, he was initiated into another esoteric order, the German-based Ordo Templi Orientis, in which he rose to become the leader of its British branch, which he reformulated in accordance with his Thelemite beliefs. So he was charismatic. Through OTO, Thelemite groups were established in Britain, Australia, and North America. Crowley spent the First World War in the United States, where he took up painting and campaigned for the German war effort against Britain. Well, that's fucking outstanding right there. That is absolutely somebody you should be listening to. His biographers later revealed that he had infiltrated the pro-German movement to assist the British intelligence services. That is probably a retcon of history. We'll get into it. In 1920, he established the Abbey of Thelema, a religious commune in Cephalus, Sicily, where he lived with his various followers. His libertine lifestyle led to denunciations in the British press, and the Italian government evicted him in 1923. He divided the following 2 decades between France, Germany, and England, and continued to promote Thelema until his death. You know, you can tell the fruits of the Spirit because you get welcomed. And there are very few places that I go that I am not going to be welcomed at. Most of those are going to be associated with the darker arts, right? Dens where they sell drugs, places where they are selling people, things along that nature. I'm not going to be welcome there, right? I'm not going to be really welcome in clubs, I guess, because I'm not a whole lot of fun. I know, right? I care very much about reverberations and the energies of things, and there's not a lot of good energy in the club. You can go on any given night, and there's probably going to be a fight. It's not the best place to hang out. But, like, getting kicked out of countries takes a whole nother level of assholery, right? You got to be on a whole different level of dickhole to get kicked out of countries, right? To get excluded from countries, right? Denunciated by the British press, and the Italian government evicted him. Like, evicted from an entire peninsula. That is wild, right? And the fruits of the spirit, bro. Like, you can tell. Crowley gained widespread notoriety during his lifetime, being a drug user, a bisexual, and an individualist social critic. Hey, I'm going to piss somebody else off. This thing is not a thing, right? If you are a man and you will put a penis in your mouth, you are gay. It does not matter that you will also participate with the lady parts, right? If you will put a penis in your mouth as a dude, you are gay. Bisexual is deviation, right? It is you not making a choice. And I will tell you right now, I don't care what you do with your genitals. I do not give two flying fucks what you do with them. I am a pastor who has performed some religious marriage ceremonies for same-sex couples, and it lasted until death did them part. And it was 20 years ago almost. Wow. Right when it first became a thing, I stepped into it. I don't care what you do with your genitals. But this equivocation, I'm not a fan. Sexual deviation is promiscuity, not necessarily who you choose. And so it doesn't matter if you are in a same-sex relationship. If it is a committed relationship, then you're going to be all right. But if you are being promiscuous, you are doing life wrong. You are meant to have sex. It is a thing. You are not meant to be chaste, or asceticism is highly overrated. Sexual abstinence is definitely highly overrated. It doesn't bear a whole lot of fruit, right? The save your energy so you can do magical works is just something that they tell you. There is no reason to believe that that is an effective anything. I have tried it. There was no real difference. But you are meant to have a partner. Now, this is with the caveat. There are some people who are called to multiple partners, and I know that is going to set off a whole different group of people, but again, I don't care. Some people are called to chastity, and they are not meant to have sexual relations ever in their life. Some people are called to promiscuity, and they are meant to have multiple partners. But they are not meant to have many sexual partners with someone who is not also called to that life, right? That causes all kinds of conflict if someone is a polygamist and the other person is a monogamist. Whenever they get involved with extra people, or the other person gets involved with extra people, it is going to cause intrinsic problems, right? That is not a beneficial relationship. And the problem with promiscuity and being called into that is, number one, that is a very, very small portion of the community. It is not just because you can. It is because you genuinely have love for more than one person. And those people have love for the other people involved as well. See why it's so difficult? It's hard enough to find one partner to actually commit yourself to in a positive relationship, especially these days. It is exponentially harder to find three. It is exponentially harder to a greater power to find four, and so on. And so to find even three people who can align in the proper way with the proper non-reserve, right? Like, you cannot reserve part of yourself for this one person and not the other person. It has to be open and equal and everything. And that is why it is almost nobody that is actually called, right? Most of the people who want that are doing it for sexual deviation, sexual pleasure, and things like that. And that is just simply the wrong way to go about it. And again, I don't care, right? The same amount of people are called to be chaste. Vanishingly small percentages. Almost nobody. Almost certainly not you. Right? And that's not to say that it can't be you. It can. But it is almost certainly not going to be, because it is a vanishingly small portion of the population. Almost nobody is left-handed, right? it is much smaller than that who are being called for this. There is less than a percentage of population of the entire planet that is called to sexual promiscuity in that way. Most people are called to find a partner and to commit themselves to it. That is the fruit of the Spirit. Right? It is possible that Mr. Crowley was indeed called to be one of those people, but it is highly doubtful. We will see what the fruit of his particular actions was. We're about to get into the meat of the situation. Also, the part about the biographers, I mean, if someone is looking to shine the best light upon you, then they will. And if they are looking to shine the worst light upon you, then they will. And anybody who is picking up Mr. Crowley's life to write a biography about is going to be polarized to either end of that spectrum. They are not going to be impartial. They are not going to be indifferent. And so they will have a tendency, especially in this time period, to color the way that we are supposed to look at things. Anyone who was outwardly supportive of the German efforts is going to be automatically negative in my book. Right? My grandfather went to fight in the Pacific Theater to get rid of those particular people, and I do not hold any particular affection for anybody that was on that side of the situation. And so if you were sympathetic, you are not going to be a good person to me at all. I don't care who you were, what your calling was. If, however, he was infiltrative, there is no evidence of that. I don't believe. We may get that, we may see that, but probably not. It is more likely that he was here avoiding having to fight in the war than it was that he was a secret agent, right? Because, I mean, does that look like a secret agent to you? I know, I probably here he is again. That absolutely looks like a secret agent, don't it? Look at this guy. This absolutely looks like somebody that you could entrust to be a secret agent, right? Absolutely. All right, that's enough shitting on him personally for now. All right, early life. Crowley was born Edward Alexander Crowley at 30 Clendon Square in Royal Leamington Spa, Warwickshire on 12 October of 1875. His father, Edward Crowley, was trained as an engineer, but his share in a lucrative family brewing business, Crowley's Alton Ales, allowed him to retire before his son was born. His mother, Emily Bertha Bishop, came from a Devonshire Somerset family and had a strained relationship with her son. She described him as the Beast, a name that he reveled in. I wonder if that had some implications later on in his life. The couple had been married at London's Kensington Registry Office in November of 1874. They were evangelical Christians. Crowley's father was born a Quaker, but converted to the Exclusive Brethren, a faction of a Christian fundamentalist group known as the Plymouth Brethren. And again, that is an extremely chaste group, right? They were heavy on suppression of anything that was slightly pleasurable. Then the Quakers, right? The Quakers fundamentally were against pleasure. We have Quaker oats specifically for that reason. Emily likewise converted upon marriage. Crowley's father was particularly devout, spending his time as a traveling preacher for the sect and reading a chapter from the Bible to his wife and son after breakfast every day. That is absolutely balanced life right there. I know that's going to piss somebody off, but once again, fall back to the Bible study and I will really piss you off. What we're getting already from Mr. Crowley is an overbearing parent, an underbearing parent, and a religious hammering when he was a child that will probably lead to religious rebellion later in life. Let's see if I'm correct. Right, his mother called him a beast, the beast, right? With the Christian fundamentalist, you would know that is the beast of Revelation, which is supposed to bring in the end of all things, right? There's many misconceptions about the beast. Again, fall back to the Bible study, and the prophecies attached to it have a multitude of problems because there's always a problem with prophecy. But he's had his favorite was the father, who was particularly devout and maybe had a tendency to be overbearing. Right, you see that a lot in Christian fundamentalists. If you get a little bit of pleasure as a Quaker and you're a child, that will quickly be beaten out of you. That is absolutely a thing that they do. And if you don't know that, I don't know what to tell you. But right, if you are caught taking a handle on things for yourself, you get some severe punishments as a Quaker. If you are partaking in the wrong kinds of foods, same thing. Right, much like a Mormon drinking caffeine, just totally against the rules. The Quakers got a lot of things against the rules, and they are a little bit heavy-handed in the discipline attached to those things. That is just simply history. So, yeah. And so his father was an overbearing minister, and his mother was slightly devout and just dismissed him, at least probably derided him. Following the death of their baby daughter in 1880 and 1881, the Crowleys moved to Red Hill, Surrey. At the age of 8, Crowley was sent to H.T. Habersham's Evangelical Christian Boarding School in Hastings, and then to Eber Preparatory School in Cambridge, run by the Reverend Henry D'Arcy Champney, whom Crowley considered a sadist. So, at the age of 8, he was sent to a preparatory school, religiously based, and the reverend who run it, well, he considered a sadist. I wonder if that had some effects upon his religious life later in life. In March of 1887, when Crowley was 11 years old, his father died of tongue cancer. Oh look, it's those fruits that I like to talk about so often. Now, I am not saying that Mr. Crowley's brought upon himself this, but being overbearing and lashing at people, reciting the particular book every day after breakfast, might have led to things. There are repercussions for taking away free will from people. Crowley describes this as a turning point in his life, and he always maintained an admiration of his father, describing him as my hero and my friend. Yeah, I bet if we had a sit-down conversation that I could poke some holes in that particular sentence. I'm just saying, I do have a little bit of knowledge about some psychological things, and for one, right, 11 is prepubescent, that is before puberty hits for most people. Your father dying before you hit puberty has a major effect upon your growth and your comprehension of things. That father being overbearing religious is going to have another bearing upon things. And your brain is not fully developed at 11 years old. There are many things that you will absolutely misunderstand, misinterpret, and misremember. It takes some extensive work in the shadow to get those things clarified. There is all kinds of life patterns that get set from the age of 8 on up that are pretty hard to break because your brain was not fully developed and you misremember many things. And so, while he does describe him as my hero and friend, it is probable that he would not have said the same thing in real time. Right? They sent him away at age 8, so 8, 9, 10, and 11. He was in a school away from home, right? A boarding school, Christian boarding school in Cambridge, which is not in the same place where did they move? Lexington? Was it Lexington? Anyway, they moved, right? This was not there in the same place. They moved to Red Hill, Surrey. And I don't know how far that is from Cambridge, but it's at least not the same place, right? And so, first off, there's not a whole lot that you're going to remember accurately from 8. Secondly, right, the age from 8 to 11, he's going to see them on weekends and holidays at best. Over the summer, possibly. That is not an extensive amount of time. That is not living in the same home for 5 years. There's going to be a lot that you miss. And so I am fully willing to say that Mr. Crowley probably had some resentment that he did not understand. and that almost certainly explains some of the later things in his life. Inheriting a third of his father's wealth, he began misbehaving at school and was harshly punished by Champney. Crowley's family removed him from the school when he developed albuminuria, a pathological condition of elevated albumin protein in the urine. Interesting. He then attended Malvern College and Tunbridge School, both of which he despised and left after a few terms. He became increasingly skeptical of Christianity, pointing out biblical inconsistencies to his religious teachers. Now, that we're going to share in common, right? I have the whole Bible playlist where we read aloud from the Bible and we saw this, right? We literally saw that there were several biblical inconsistencies, right? The entirety of the Old Testament is severely inconsistent. It's fine as an allegory. It does not work as history for a variety of reasons, the inconsistencies being one of them, right? There is inconsistencies throughout the entirety of the book, often within the same book and like the individual books inside the greater book, and even within the same chapter within those books, you find contradictions to itself. And so, yes, there are many biblical inconsistencies. And went against the Christian morality of his upbringing by smoking, masturbating, and having sex with prostitutes from whom he contracted gonorrhea. That can't possibly have anything to do with him rebelling against his Christian, Protestant, Quakerish upbringing. Right? Can't have anything to do with that. Sent to live with a brethren tutor in Eastbourne, he undertook chemistry courses at Eastbourne College. He developed interest in chess, poetry, and mountain climbing, and in 1894 climbed Beachy Head before visiting the Alps and joining the Scottish Mountaineering Club. The following year, he returned to the Bernese Alps, climbing the Eiger, Trift, Jungfrau, Munch, and Wetterhorn. Those are all very impressive, right? The mountaineering is an extremely demanding sport. It is something that will kill you if you do it wrong, so props to him for doing it, for completing all of these. That is an impressive thing. Cambridge University, 1895 to 1898. Having adopted the name of Aleister over Edward, in October of 1895, Crowley began a 3-year course at Trinity College, Cambridge, where he was entered for the Moral Science Tripos, studying philosophy. With approval from his personal tutor, he changed to English literature, which was not then part of the curriculum offered. And so I'm willing to bet that philosophy was a little bit too deep for Mr. Crowley. And Crowley spent much of his time at university engaged in his pastimes, becoming president of the chess club and practicing the game for 2 hours a day. He briefly considered a professional career as a chess player. Crowley also embraced his love of literature and poetry, particularly the works of Richard Francis Burton and Percy Bysshe Shelley. Many of his own poems appeared in the student publications such as the Granta, Cambridge Magazine, and Cantab. He continued mountaineering, going on holiday to the Alps to climb every year from 1894 to 1898. Often with his friend Oscar Eckstein, and in 1897 he made the first ascent of the Monk without a guide. These feats led to his recognition in the alpine mountaineering community. And again, I will absolutely give him credit for that. What is this? For many years I had loathed being called Alec, partly because of the unpleasant sound and sight of the word, partly because it was the name by which my mother called me. There's that resentment. Edward did not seem to suit me, and the diminutiveness of Ted or Ned were even less appropriate. Alexander was too long, and Sandy suggested toe, hair, and freckles. I had read in some book or other that the most favorable name for becoming famous was one consisting of a dactyl followed by a spondy at the end of the hexameter, like Jeremy Taylor. Aleister Crowley fulfilled these conditions, and Aleister is the Gaelic form of Alexander. To adopt it would satisfy my romantic ideals. Crowley on his name change. Crowley had his first significant mystical experience while on holiday in Stockholm in December of 1896. Several biographers, including Lawrence Sutin, Richard Kaczynski, and Tobias Churton, believe that this was the result of Crowley's first same-sex sexual experience, which enabled him to recognize his bisexuality. And once again, if you will put a penis in your mouth, you are gay. At Cambridge, Crowley maintained a vigorous sex life with women, largely with female prostitutes, from one of whom he caught syphilis. The good old clap, boy. Ain't nothing like it, right? Never had that problem. But eventually he took part in the same-sex activities despite their illegality. And again, I don't care, right? I really don't. But denying it is the problem. Obfuscating, right, is the problem. And most of the people who call themselves bisexual are just not willing to accept that they actually prefer men. And that's not to say that you can't participate in things and not be that way, but no straight guy ever wakes up and says, you know what, I wonder what a dick tastes like. Right? That's never a conversation that happens. I wonder what. No. Right? If you want to know what that tastes like, there is definitely something about you. Right? And that's not a bad thing, but you should embrace your reality. In October of 1897, Crowley met Aleister Charles Pollitt, president of the Cambridge University Footlights Dramatic Club, and the two entered into a relationship. They broke apart because Pollitt did not share Crowley's increasing interest in Western esotericism, a breakup that Crowley regretted for many years. In 1897, Crowley traveled to St. Petersburg in Russia, later saying he was trying to learn Russian, as he was considering a future diplomatic career there. In October of 1897, a brief illness triggered conditions of mortality, considerations of mortality, and the futility of all human endeavor, and Crowley abandoned all thoughts of a diplomatic career in favor of pursuing an interest in the occult. The futility of all human endeavor is what led him to the occult. Well, there is absolutely nothing misaligned about that. That is absolutely perfectly balanced, right? You definitely have the correct mindset. That's definitely what you have, right? Because, if you think that everything in life is futile, then you're probably looking for an excuse for some things. And so, yeah, that is not why I am here. There is no futility in human endeavor. There are futile human endeavors now, don't get me wrong. There are definitely things you can do that waste your time. But we are here for the experience, and there is not futility, right? Almost everyone has productivity in their life, right? Most people get married, have children, have a job, buy a home, grow professionally and personally. None of that is futile. Not a single bit of that, right? Even if there is no grand win, even if you don't become generationally successful, just being who you are and walking your authentic path is going to be not futile. If you are doing it with genuine love and interest and knowledge, then you will grow. That means that it is not futile. I hate nihilism. I find it to be absolutely despicable. It is the worst mindset possible. The same thing with the prison planet. Right? The whole, we're born to be punished. God is just sitting there waiting to burn you because you didn't accept a blood sacrifice from him 2,000 years ago. Is some bullshit, right? Complete and total bullshit. You should be seeking to get hidden knowledge, because hidden knowledge means that you've got more knowledge. Occult means hidden. It doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean evil. It means that it was occluded. It was hidden from sight. We're here trying to bring light to that, and it is not because of the futility of human endeavor. It's not because this is a prison planet and we have to break free from the karmic cycle, which is some bullshit that some of these nihilists out there are definitely telling you, definitely even today, right? You're trapped in a cycle where you die and you're reborn, and people are just, or not even people, entities are out there absorbing your energy in a negative manner. There are entities, they do feed off of, or entities feed off of your energy. That is a true thing, but that is not the purpose of life. That is one of the side effects of things that happen. And so you are not on the prison planet Life is not futile. This is not a punishment. And there is no lake of fire waiting for you on the other side. In March of 1898, he obtained Arthur White's book, The Book About Black Magic and Pacts. I am glad we did not do that one. And then Karl van Eckarthausen's The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary. We have, however, done that one. We have done a study of The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary, and there was actually some very good information in there. That same year, Leonard Smithers, a publisher who Crowley met through Pollitt, published 100 copies of Crowley's poem, Aceladama, The Place to Bury Strangers In. But it was not a particular success. That same year, Crowley published a string of other poems, including White Stains, a decadent collection of erotic poetry that was printed abroad lest its publication be prohibited by the British authorities. You can tell that it was absolutely a worthy endeavor because you had to carry it somewhere else. There is a time and a place for pretty much anything. That is something that I do emphatically believe. I believe that all things are part of the process. There is not a whole lot of purpose behind erotica, right? That is from somebody who has used those things for self-gratification, right? I do not deny being a human. There is not a whole lot of benefit to humanity from that, right? You can do those things from your imagination. It's a little bit easier if you got some material. I understand that. But that is not a sin, right? If it was a sin, there would be more problems attached to that particular thing, right? I don't consider masturbation to be a sin. It should not be your desire for the day, right? You should not live your whole day wanting to go home and wank one out. I mean, any more than you should do your whole day wanting to go home and have a drink or to go home and just lay around, right? These things, while they have their purpose, are not for desires. Feeding into those energies brings you into a negative position, right? It takes from you your own ability to do things for yourself. Now, I do not hold to the retain your sexual energy for magical power. Right? I find that to be ridiculous. I've already discussed that, at least in part, in this video. But pointing yourself towards those things leads you in the wrong direction, right? If your desire is to sexually gratify yourself every day, then that is going to be your main focus, and that's what your life is going to revolve around, and it's a bad idea. It doesn't work. It's unbalanced. I am not at all surprised to find out that Mr. Crowley was involved in erotica at any level whatsoever. Right? Now, once again, right, sexual activities are very personal things. I don't have a problem with whatever you want to do in your personal life, right? As long as you are not acting to the detriment of other people, then it's probably going to be okay. But participating in these things negatively affects you, and investing your energy into a permanent investment of that, right? Anything that you write is a permanent investment of your energy. My energy is invested in this book on a permanent level, right? This is forever. Now, I can take it from publication, but other people have bought it. There is at least a copy out there somewhere. It's forever. This is an investment. This is an enchantment, right? Writing is spell work. When you write something, you're investing your energy into it. And so you should be exceedingly careful into what enchantments that you are making if they are going to last for a long time. Now, on the top of that, right, enchantments do not hold power that you do not imbue into them, but by writing, you are imbuing, right? You are necessarily putting part of you into a work, whether that is nonfiction or fiction. I've got a fiction book in this box back here that I wrote, right? Both of those are energetic investments from me, and they hold power, right? People can read these things and change their life. That is power. Both of my books have that, although the fiction one has it to a much lesser degree, right? It was written almost a decade ago now. Wow. Energetically investing yourself into a permanent thing is something that you should always give consideration to. What we do on this channel, I have given consideration to. When we were doing reaction videos, I was very selective into what I allowed on this channel. And some of you may remember that you were here then, right? I didn't deal with anything that was glorifying sex, drugs, or violence at all. Well, that knocked out over half of music straight off the top. I only dealt with people who were doing things in a positive manner, talking about overcoming these problems. That is all I dealt with. It was a very small section, but that was intentional because this is an enchantment too, right? Writing things down is spell work. Speaking things aloud is spell work as well. And what I am doing here is creating a permanent possibility for a life-changing event, which is energetic investment. And so I am very much aware whenever I put something out of the energy that I place into it and the intention behind it and the possible detriments that can come out of it. I do nothing unless it is aligned with the betterment of all of humanity, at least to my understanding. That is because of the laws of creation. All of that to say, right? If you want to write erotica, do your thing, right? But you will probably not bear the fruit of your life, right? You will not have a happy relationship if you are doing so. It's just something that is almost certainly not going to be part of your life. And if you are fine with that, then by all means, go and write your white stains. But you will probably, almost certainly, feel the reverberations of those effects. Be very, very careful onto anything in which you invest permanence. In July of 1898, he left Cambridge, not having taken any degree at all. I'm not surprised. Despite a first class showing in 1897 exams and consistent second class honors, results before that. Again, I am absolutely not surprised. We have seen nothing that suggests permanence, right? If I was to type Mr. Crowley from what we've seen so far, I would say that he is probably an S, E, and he is probably a T. We haven't got into him expressing himself, so I can't tell you whether he's direct or informative yet. We will be going through the book, right? But he does appear to be about the new experience to a great degree, even to his detriment, and for doing things his way with no flexibility attached. And that is just from the things we've seen here, right? I haven't even gotten into the book, but he is probably an ST. All right, the Golden Dawn, 1898 to 1899. Well, there's a very long and lucrative career. All of 1 year, huh? In August of 1898, Crowley was in Zermatt, Switzerland, where he met the chemist Julian L. Baker, and the two began discussing their common interest in alchemy. Back in London, Baker introduced Crowley to George Cecil Jones, Baker's brother-in-law and fellow member of the occult society known as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was founded in 1888. Crowley was initiated into the Outer Order of the Golden Dawn on 18 November of 1898 by the group's leader Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers. The ceremony took place on the Golden Dawn's Isis Urania Temple, held at London's Mark Mason's Hall, where Crowley took the magical motto and name Father Perdurabo, which he interpreted as Brother I shall endure to the end. And so once again we see him taking yet another pseudonym. I am sure that that is perfectly motivated. Crowley moved into his own luxury flat at 6769 Chancery Lane and soon invited a senior Golden Dawn member, Alan Bennett, to live with him as his personal magical tutor. Bennett taught Crowley more about ceremonial magic and the ritual use of drugs. How about opening them doorways? I'm sure that that's going to lead to wonderful things, right? If you are experimenting with drugs and magical practices, I am sure that it is going to lead to benefits. Positive, right? We haven't discussed that 1,000 fucking times. And together they performed the rituals of the Goetia, a European sorcery often referred to as witchcraft, transmitted through grimoires containing instructions for magical practices. Awesome. Until Bennett left for South Asia to study Buddhism. Why would you need to go study Buddhism if you already knew how to do magic? In November of 1899, Crowley purchased Boleskine House and Foyers on the shore of Loch Ness in Scotland. He developed a love of Scottish culture, describing himself as the Lord of Boleskine, and took to wearing traditional Highland dress even during visits to London. He continued writing poetry, publishing Jezebel and other tragic poems. Tales of Arceus, Songs of the Spirit, Appeal to the American Republic, and Jephthah in 1898 to 1899. Most gained mixed reviews from literary critics, although Jephthah was considered a particular critical success. Crowley soon progressed through the lower grades of the Golden Dawn and was ready to enter the group's inner second order. He was unpopular in the group. His bisexuality and libertine lifestyle gained him a bad reputation, and he developed feuds with some of the members, including W.B. Yeats. Wow! Choose your enemies wisely, I guess. Now, I am not surprised by this. This does not surprise me at all from the history that we have written that he would come into conflict with people who were seeking a higher lifestyle. But I'm not at all surprised, right? My understanding of the Order of the Golden Dawn, right, they were trying to do the thing, right? They were attempting to raise the vibration. I'm not intimately familiar with all of their rites and things, but I don't believe that they did this sex magic stuff, right? I don't believe that that was part of it. They appeared, at least on the surface, to be properly aligned in the ways that you would need to be in order to actually perform the ceremonial magics in the right way. Now, I'm not a big one for ceremonial magic either, right? The ceremonies are different things that are not necessary but can be needed. That is a whole different discussion, but I am not in the least bit surprised that he set people off in this particular order. If they were aligned correctly, these things would not be, for them, acceptable, right? Again, I don't care if you're gay, right? I really don't. I do if you are bisexual, because that implies that you are not balanced in your life. That implies that you are not embracing what you were created to be in one way or the other. It implies the inability to make decisions. It implies the inability to commit to things. All of that is antithetical to what you need to do to perform magic. So, yeah, I'm not surprised at all that he would develop feuds. Right? Now, I am slightly familiar with Yeats. He was the Irish poet, right? I'm not surprised that someone of Yeats's stature would be in direct opposition to Mr. Crowley at all. When the Golden Dawn's London Lodge refused to initiate Crowley into the Second Order, he visited Mathers in Paris, who personally admitted him into the Adeptus minor grade. Because, if you... Okay, you join this group, right? And the group gets to decide whether you are ready to proceed. And they say, no, you're not. So, naturally, the balanced person is going to go seek out this one person to get the approval from. That's going to be the natural outflow, right? All of these people are telling you, you are not ready. You are not balanced. You are not ready for this responsibility. And so you step into finding a different way to do it instead of stepping into the responsibility of doing it correctly. Right? Absolutely. A schism had developed between Mathers and the London members of the Golden Dawn who were unhappy with his autocratic rule. Well, you ought to be. Acting under Mathers' orders, Crowley, with the help of his mistress and fellow initiate, Elaine Simpson, attempted to seize the Vault of the Adepts, a temple spaced at 36 Blythe Road, West Kensington, from the London Lodge members. When the case was taken to court, the judge ruled in favor of the London Lodge, as they had paid for the rent, leaving both Crowley and Mathers isolated from the group. And again, I am going to personally attack Mr. Crowley because this is absolutely something that what a balanced person would do, right? A balanced person would attempt to go and seize the vault of the adepts from this established group who are paying the rent at the place. That is absolutely what somebody who is balanced and a magical adept would do. Now, I am speaking as someone who is, indeed, a magical adept. Right? I don't claim masterhood, but I have done things, and I do know the requirements that are required for it to be done. And so far, we have not seen anything that would lead me to believe that Mr. Crowley's attempts at magic would be beneficial to anyone, including himself. Mexico, India, Paris, and marriage, 1900 to 1903. In 1900, Crowley traveled to Mexico via the United States, settling in Mexico City and starting a relationship with a local woman. Developing a love of the country, he continued experimenting with ceremonial magic, working with John Dee's Enochian invocations. He later said he had been initiated into Freemasonry while there, and he wrote a play based upon Richard Wagner's Tannhauser, as well as a series of poems published as oracles. Eckstein joined him later in 1900, and together they climbed several mountains, including Iztaccíhuatl, Popocatépetl, and Colima, the latter of which they had to abandon owing to a volcanic eruption. Leaving Mexico, Crowley headed to San Francisco before sailing for Hawaii aboard the Nippon Maru. On the ship, he had a brief affair with a married woman named Mary Alice Rogers, saying he fell in love with her. He wrote a series of poems about the romance published as Alice in Adultery. First off the top, I'm going to state this, and I'm going to state this unequivocally. You are not called to have sex with somebody else's spouse, and if you do so, then you are not prepared for the magical way. That is as simple and as plain as I can possibly put it. On top of that, right, despite the fact that, right, he's a Freemason, he's in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, he started his own thing, right, Thelema or whatever. Has Thelema started yet? I thought they said it was starting, and then, we didn't get there. Where was it? Well, maybe not. Maybe we're not there yet. But, like, he's doing it like all of these things. These things require you to be balanced, right? Being a member of the Freemasons, right? I'm not a member of the Freemasons. I am not associated with them. I do not attribute any of the evil things to them that most people do. I discuss that in a whole chapter in this book. But they do have requirements. As a Freemason, you are to be sober. That is one of their requirements. Now, I believe that they have relaxed a little bit about the use of marijuana because it is legal now, and somewhat around the use of alcohol, but for the most part, you are not allowed to be an alcoholic and a Mason. You are not allowed to be a drug abuser and a Mason. You are not allowed to be sexually prolific with other people's spouses and a Mason. That is against the things that they hold dear, right? You are required to be taking correct action. You are required to be able to support yourself. You are required to be a pillar of the community in order to be a Mason. And so what we see here is completely antithetical to everything that he has taken a vow for, right? The Order of the Hermetic Dawn, or the Golden Dawn, at least from my understanding, is aligned in the same way that the Masons was. The Rosicrucians, the same type of thing. And so what we are seeing here is a very unbalanced man without the capacity to do the things that he is writing about, right? There is no reason to believe that this man has any esoteric actual knowledge whatsoever. He is completely unbalanced. And he wrote an enchantment about it, right? He wrote a whole series of poems about this, about being energetically unbalanced and doing the wrong thing. He inscribed that in permanence. Yeah, I'm sure he's going to get some really beneficial fruit out of this. Briefly stopping in Japan and Hong Kong, Crowley reached Ceylon, where he met with Alan Bennett, who was there studying Shaivism. The pair spent some time in Kandy before Bennett decided to become a Buddhist monk in the Theravada tradition, traveling to Burma to do so. Crowley decided to tour India, devoting himself to the Hindu practice of Raja Yoga, by which means he believed he had achieved the spiritual state of dhyana. Means meditation and contemplation. Dhyana is taken up in yoga practices as a means of samadhi and self-knowledge. So he is just saying that he figured out how to meditate. Okay, well that I can believe, right? You can achieve meditation even if you are not correctly aligned. As a matter of fact, getting correctly aligned is intrinsic to being able to do meditation. Right, being able to enter the state of nothingness and to allow the spirit to talk to you is intrinsic to becoming balanced, and so you can do that part of it. I thought that he was claiming enlightenment, and there is absolutely no reason to believe that. And the various terms, I know what Maya is and some of the other things because of the Blavatsky, but some of these things I just don't care to learn. Right? This word, dhyana, I don't need that. I can say meditation and it works just as well. Right? That is the thing that leads to samadhi and self-knowledge, but it is not samadhi and self-knowledge. And so that's fine. He spent much of this time studying at the Meenakshi temple in Madura. At this time, he also wrote poetry, which was published as The Sword of Song. He contracted malaria and had to recuperate from the disease in Calcutta and Rangoon. In 1902, he was joined in India by Eckenstein and several other mountaineers, Guy Knowles, H. Piffinal, V. Wesley, and Jules Jacques Guillemot. Together, the Eckenstein-Crowley expedition attempted K2, which was never climbed before. On the journey, Crowley was affected with influenza, malaria, and snow blindness. And other expedition members were also struck with illness. They reached an altitude of 20,000 feet before turning back. Here's another thing that I'm probably going to piss people off with. It is entirely possible to get sick as a magical practitioner. I do not deny that whatsoever. You can still develop cancer, and you may not be able to cure that cancer. Right? The things that I have done to heal myself is not guaranteed to heal everything. There are bottlenecks, and some of those you cannot avoid. But for the most part, if you are actively practicing the things of enlightenment, if you are actually balanced in your life in the correct way, you don't really. And you do, right? Bottlenecks exist, but you don't live that way, right? It's not a life of sickness if you are properly aligned. It's just simply not, right? Again, I have at least accomplished adeptship. I have been able to do some things, including healing myself. And so I do not speak about this with no knowledge. I do not speak about this with someone else's knowledge. It is entirely possible to heal yourself from most things, but there will be things that you cannot. But if you are just ordinarily, if you are properly aligned, then the ordinary things are not going to affect you. You're not going to be afflicted with influenza, malaria, and snow blindness on a single expedition. It's just not going to happen. Now, that's not to say that you won't get one of them, right? But if you do, it will probably affect you less. I have been completely surrounded by people who were sick since I have been on this path, and I haven't contracted anything. That's not to say that it is impossible, right? But it has not been a thing, right? I have had several afflictions that I have healed myself from by being balanced. That is why I emphasize it so very much. This is a further demonstration of the imbalance in his life. We have seen nothing but imbalance so far. There has been no balanced actions that we have seen, right? He has not had a permanent sexual partner. He has not had a permanent living situation. He has not had a permanent religious situation. He is seeking, and that is valid. That is a good thing. But I don't know that he ever found. Having arrived in Paris in November of 1902, he socialized with his friend the painter, Gerald Kelly, and through him became a fixture of the Parisian art scene. Whilst there, Crowley wrote a series of poems on the work of an acquaintance, the sculptor Auguste Rodin. These poems were later published as Rodin in Rhyme. One of those frequenting this milieu was W. Somerset Maugham, who, after briefly meeting Crowley, later used him as a model for the character of Oliver Haddo in his novel, The Magician. He returned to Boleskine in April of 1903. In August, Crowley wed Gerald Kelly's sister, Rose Edith Kelly, in a marriage of convenience to prevent her from entering an arranged marriage. The marriage appalled the Kelly family and damaged his friendship with Gerald. Well, that's good tidings right there. Your friend says, "Nah, I don't want you to marry my sister." That's absolutely a great thing about you. The marriage appalled. Like, how bad do you have to be for it to be appalling? Heading on a honeymoon to Paris, Cairo, and then Ceylon, Crowley fell in love with Rose and worked to prove his affections. While on his honeymoon, he wrote her a series of love poems published as Rosamundi and Other Love Songs, as well as authoring the religious satire, Why Jesus Wept. Developing Thelema, Egypt, and the Book of the Law, 1904. In February of 1904, Crowley and Rose arrived in Cairo, pretending to be a prince and princess. They rented an apartment in which Crowley set up a temple room and began invoking ancient Egyptian deities, while studying Islamic mysticism and Arabic. That is absolutely going to be effective, right? Invoking Egyptian deities and studying Islam is absolutely copacetic. They work together flawlessly, seamlessly, with no problems whatsoever. According to Crowley's later account, Rose regularly became delirious and informed him, "They are waiting for you." On 18 March, she explained that they were the god Horus, and on 20 March proclaimed that the equinox of the gods has come. She led him to a nearby museum where she showed him a 7th century BCE mortuary stele known as the Stele of Ankh and Khonsu. Crowley thought it important that the exhibit's number was 666, the number of the beast in Christian belief, and in later years termed the artifact the Stele of Revealing. According to Crowley's later statements, on April 8th, he heard a disembodied voice identifying itself as that of Iowis, the messenger of Horus, or Hor-Parkarat. Crowley said that he wrote down everything the voice taught him over the course of the next 3 days and titled it Liber al Legis, or the Book of the Law. The book proclaimed that humanity was entering a new eon, and that Crowley would serve as its prophet. It stated that a supreme moral law would be introduced in this eon. "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," and that people should learn to live in tune with their will. This book, and the philosophy that it espoused, became the cornerstone of Crowley's religion, Thelema. Crowley said at that time he was unsure what to do with the Book of the Law. Often resenting it, he said that he ignored the instructions which the text commanded him to perform, which included taking the Stele of Revealing from the museum, fortifying his own island, and translating the book into all the world's languages. According to his account, he instead sent typescripts of the work to several occultists he knew, putting the manuscript away and ignoring it. There are entities. I firmly and emphatically believe that. I have been visited by an angel. It was not intentional. It's not something I called upon. It was something that just kind of happened. I've described it before, but the angel came to me, told me I was going to spread the word of God, and then booked it out. There was no conversation. I didn't answer or anything. I had a spiritual experience by which I was pulled out of my body, and I witnessed the creation. I witnessed the interplay. There was no talking in that particular thing. There are entities. I believe that Even if I cannot prove it, it is in the realm of speculation, but I do believe it. I have a whole theory of spiritual evolution by which I explain, at least to my understanding, how it would work. All of that to say that there are entities who are aligned with the betterment of humankind, and there are entities that are aligned with the detriment of humankind, and it is exceedingly difficult to separate the two. One of the best examples that I can get is Abraham, right? This was before the name change. You remember the name changes being problems? Yeah, this was before the name change. And he was having trouble making ends meet, and so he decided an entity came to him and said, well, don't be afraid, but I want you to go up this mountain and tie that kid up and kill him. And he's like, all right, bet. And so he does, right? He takes the kid up the mountain, and he doesn't tell the mom what he's doing. He doesn't tell the kid what he's doing, and the kid's like, well, where's the sacrifice? Right? Whole different problem. He gets to the top of the mountain, and he ties the kid up, and he puts him on the altar, and he's about to plunge the knife. And another entity, that is how it is described in the book, comes and says, whoa, what are you doing? No. Kill the goat. Right? That's how it worked out. Now, I know I'm taking a little bit of poetic license, but that's the story. There was an entity that told him to kill his child, and there was a different entity that told him to not to. He listened to both of them. Right? Later on, we get another example of this, right? We look at, who's a good example? Jeremiah? Who is the prophet with the ass, right? The prophet with the ass is going, and he asked, do I go? And he's told, yeah. And then he goes, and an entity pops up and says, no, what are you doing? And he stops the donkey by making the donkey stop, right? And then the guy gets cursed because he gets mad at the donkey for stopping because he didn't see this angel that made the donkey stop. Again, it is two entities giving directly conflicting advice, both saying that they are from the Lord. One of them leads to detriment, one of them leads to betterment. The ones that lead to detriment are always involved with a blood sacrifice, or they are scary. If an angel or an entity pops up and the thing that they say is, have no fear, it is probably one of the negative entities. Right? The positive entities, you don't see that. You don't. People see them and they get a feeling of peace and love and security. And it comes down and it gives them this message and they're fine. And then you got the other entities and it shows up and people are like, and it's like, no, don't be afraid. I come from God. I give you the orders from God himself. Go and kill all of these people and cut off the tip of their penis. Right? Look at David. So it is entirely possible that Mr. Crowley did indeed have contact with an entity. It is almost certain that that entity was aligned with the detriment of humankind. The do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law is exactly the same energy as go up the mountain and kill your kid. Kanchenjunga and China, 1905 to 1906. Returning to Boleskine, Crowley became to believe that Mathers was using magic against him, and the relationship between the two broke down. On July 28th of 1905, Rose gave birth to Crowley's first child, a daughter named Lilith. Never could have guessed that that would have been the name of the child. And Crowley wrote the pornographic snowdrops from a curate's garden to entertain his recuperating wife, again with the enchantment. He also founded a publishing company through which to publish his poetry, naming it the Society for the Propagation of Religious Truth, in parody of the Society for Promoting Christian Knowledge. Among its first publications were Crowley's collected works, edited by Ivor Back, an old friend of Crowley's, who was both a practicing surgeon and an enthusiast of literature. His poetry often received strong reviews, either positive or negative, but never sold well. In an attempt to gain more publicity, he offered a reward of £100 for the best essay on his work. The winner was J.F.C. Fuller, a British Army officer and military historian, whose essay, The Star in the West, heralded Crowley's poetry as some of the greatest ever written. The things people will do for money. Crowley decided to climb Kanchenjunga in the Himalayas of Nepal, widely recognized as the world's most treacherous mountain. The collaboration between Kurt Guillemot, Charles Adolphe Raymond, Alex Pache, and Aleister Crowley de Reiki. The expedition was marred by much argument between Crowley and the others, who thought that he was reckless. They eventually mutinied against Crowley's control, with the other climbers heading back down the mountain as nightfall approached, despite Crowley's warnings that it was dangerous. Subsequently, Pache and several porters were killed in an accident, something for which Crowley was widely blamed by the mountaineering community. Now, without knowing the specifics, if you are climbing a mountain, you should know not to travel after dark. That should be something that you know. No matter how pissed off you are, you can depart in the morning, right? Make safe camp. Blaming Crowley for that is probably not good, but you never know what the extenuating circumstances was. He may have been trying to taste penis, and somebody may not have been happy with that. Spending time in Moharbahanji, where he took part in big game hunting and wrote the homoerotic work, The Scented Garden, Crowley met up with Rose and Lilith in Calcutta before being forced to leave India after non-lethally shooting 2 men who tried to mug him. What? So, he was forced to leave India after non-lethally shooting 2 criminals? That don't make no sense. Briefly visiting Bennett in Burma, Crowley and his family decided to tour southern China, hiring porters and a nanny for the purpose. Crowley smoked opium throughout the journey, which took the family from Tingye to Yongshan, Dali, Yanafu, and then Hanoi. On the way, he spent much time on spiritual and magical work, reciting the Bornless ritual, an invocation to his holy guardian angel, on a daily basis. I'm going to go out on a limb here. It is almost certain, right? This is pure speculation, but I am fairly confident in saying it, that he did not shoot 2 men who tried to mug him, right? This was a drug deal gone bad, and he shot somebody, and that is what led to him being forced to leave the country. Now, revisionist history is a thing. The ability to pay is something that he was able to do thanks to the money he inherited from his father, and so he could probably pay to have things obfuscated, and it is more than likely that he was not ejected from yet another country for defending himself from criminals, but it is much more likely that he was ejected from yet another country because he was in a drug deal that went wrong and he shot some people. I'm good with going out on that limb. While Rose and Lilith returned to Europe, Crowley headed to Shanghai to meet his old friend Elaine Simpson, who was fascinated by the Book of the Law. Together they performed rituals in an attempt to contact Aiwas. And this right here lets me know that they were not able to do so. Right? If they had done it, it would tell us that. Crowley then sailed to Japan and Canada before continuing to New York City, where he unsuccessfully solicited support for a second expedition up Kanchenjunga. Upon arriving in Britain, Crowley learned that his daughter Lilith had died of typhoid in Rangoon, something he later blamed on Rose's increasing alcoholism. Under emotional distress, his health began to suffer, and he underwent a series of surgical operations. That, again, lets me know just how balanced he is. He began short-lived romances with actress Vera Lola Neville and author Ada Leverson, while Rose gave birth to Crowley's second daughter, Lola Zaza, in February of 1907. And again, you can see that balance just popping out, right? But besides the series of surgical operations because of emotional distress, right? Once again, if you are on the path of adeptship, then you should be fairly well balanced in your emotions. That is not to say that you cannot get pulled outside of that balance. That is part of life. You are meant to feel all of the emotions and they all have their place. But as an adept, you should not be under emotional distress. That should be beneath you now, right? Not that you cannot have a tough situation, but you probably have a way of looking at it that will not allow you to become emotionally distressed. You might get a little salty, but you're probably not going to be in distress to the point where you begin to suffer physical symptoms, right? That is almost certainly an indication that it is not balanced in his life. On top of that, we see again that he has 2 affairs, betraying oaths, which is always a great thing, betraying the oath that he gave to his wife, who is pregnant with his child, right? But he has affairs with 2 other people, and this is only, 1 year? 1 year, 1905 to 1906. So he gets his wife pregnant, has 2 affairs, and all of this other stuff. Yeah, fruit of the spirit. With his old mentor, George Cecil Jones, Crowley continued performing the Abramelin rituals at the Ashdown Park Hotel in Coulston, Surrey. Crowley believed that in doing so he attained samiti, or union with the Godhead, thereby marking a turning point in his life. Well, we're going to see, aren't we? We will see if this is indeed a turning point. Do things start to balance out in Mr. Crowley's life from this point forward? Right? If, like, this right here is a major declaration. Right? The achievement of samadhi is the state of meditative consciousness. Right? It is spiritual liberation, the attainment of spiritual liberation. It is not merely meditating. It is not merely becoming with the oneness. It is extracting the knowledge of the whole of the oneness. And I find it extremely doubtful that Mr. Crowley actually did so. I find it extremely doubtful. But we will see. We will see if he is now balanced. Making heavy use of hashish during these rituals? No, he is not balanced. Right? Now, I'm going to give this with the caveat, right? I use marijuana. I have used it for a great part of my life recreationally. I've used it for the last decade and a half for pain management. I have not been on opioids because I have been able to use marijuana. It has kept me from several painful situations and out of the hands of the medical practitioners to a large degree. I have a lot of stuff wrong with me. There was a car wreck in 2011 that caused several problems, and now I'm at the point where I can no longer convince myself that I'm using marijuana medically, right? I no longer wake up in pain because of the healing that I have done. I can bring myself pain by being stupid, but other than that, I am fairly well these days, right? My health is wonderful, overarching, and even taking into account the broken leg. I say that to say that I am in no way opposed to the use of hashish or cannabis in a recreational manner or in a provisionary prescribed manner. But I do not participate, right? I do not get high before I meditate. If I know that I'm going to be meditating, I will not. I will hold off. I will not smoke, right? Because that is a chemical that can open a door, and it can. Marijuana is very beneficial in the use of moving of the energies. It is in opposition to pain medicine. Pain medicine closes that door entirely. That is something I have learned recently. But it is an aid and a benefit. But making heavy use of hashish lets me know that you do not have control of the door. Right? There is a door. I make reference to the door all of the time. There is a door that separates the physical incarnation from the spiritual side of things, and we are wandering into the realm of speculation, but I have the capacity to open the door. I actually give you the formula in this book. It is through isometrics, but you can flex your third eye. That flexation of the third eye releases chemicals that only normally occur during birth, death, or while you're sleeping. That chemical is reproduced in the real world, right? There are plants which contain it on the North American continent. The plant that contains the most of it is the Mimosa hostilis in the root. It is dimethyltryptamine. It is DMT. People call it ayahuasca in certain places. There's a whole ritual associated with it. It is an effective tool, but it is an unbalanced one. That door that is opened by these chemicals can be opened naturally through meditative practices, through the flexation of the human chakras. I can alter my reality willfully. I can sit in a meditative state, flex the right muscles, and alter things. I can see things in a different way. I see the auras surrounding things. I see the energies moving. I see the same things you would see in a psychedelic trip to a lesser degree because you have control over it, right? And so it's not the overwhelming that you would get from psilocybin, which is a derivative of DMT, by the way. It is a dirtier version of the same drug. You have the capacity, I have the capacity, every human being has the capacity to open those doors through dedication and hard work. That is the way you should open those doors. I do not open those doors with the medicine that I use on a daily basis, right? Now, again, I am healed. I'm having a hard time justifying medical use. I'm recreational these days, and so it is later in the day before I partake anyway. All of that to say is that if you are required to use heavy use of hashish during the ritual, you are not ready for the ritual. It is simply that easy. It is the same for all of the psychedelics. It is the same for opium. It is the same for anything, alcohol included, that you imbibe in order to alter your reality. All of those you can do without making heavy use of hashish during these rituals. He wrote an essay on the psychology of hashish, in which he championed the drug as an aid to mysticism. He also said he had been contacted once again by Aiwas in late October and November of 1907, adding that Aiwas dictated two further texts to him, Liber 7 and Liber Concordis Sinti Serpente, both of which were later classified in the corpus of the Holy Books of Thelema. Crowley wrote down more Thelemic holy books during the last 2 months of the year, including, I'm not good with Roman numerals, that is, 66? 666? No, 66. Liber Arcanum, Liber Portolucis Subfiguras 10, Liber Dao, Liber Trigrammaton, and Liber Velaritia, which he again said he had received from a preternatural source. Crowley stated that in June of 1909, when the manuscript of the Book of the Law was rediscovered at Boleskine, he developed the opinion that Thelema represented objective truth. We will probably be doing Thelema. Crowley's inheritance was running out. Trying to earn money, he was hired by George Montague Bennett, the Earl of Tankerville, to help protect him from witchcraft. Recognizing Bennett's paranoia as being based in his cocaine addiction, Crowley took him on a holiday to France and Morocco to recuperate. In 1907, he also began taking in paying students whom he instructed in occult and magical practice. Victor Newberg, whom Crowley met in February of 1907, became his sexual partner and closest disciple. In 1908, the pair toured northern Spain before heading to Tangier, Morocco. The following year, Newberg stayed at Boleskine, where he and Crowley engaged in sadomasochism. Okay. Crowley continued to write prolifically, producing such works as Ambergris, Clouds Without Water, and Conks on Pax, as well as his first attempt at an autobiography, The World's Tragedy. No pride in that, huh? Recognizing the popularity of short horror stories, Crowley wrote his own, some of which were published, and he also published several articles in Vanity Fair, a magazine edited by his friend Frank Harris. He also wrote Liber 777, a book of magical and Kabbalistic correspondences that borrowed from Mathers and Bennett. In November of 1907, Crowley and Jones decided to found an occult order to act as a successor to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, being aided in doing so by Fuller. The result was the A Delta. The group's headquarters and temple were situated at 124 Victoria Street in central London, and their rites borrowed much from those of the Golden Dawn, but with an added Thelemic basis. Its earliest members included solicitor Richard Noel Warren, artist Austin Osman Spare, Horace Sheridan Vickers, author George Ravelich. All of that's not important. In March of 1909, Crowley began production of a biannual periodical titled The Equinox. He billed this periodical, which was to become the official organ of the A Delta, as the Review of Scientific Illuminism. Crowley became increasingly frustrated with Rose's alcoholism, and in November of 1909, he divorced her on the grounds of his own adultery. Lola was entrusted to Rose's care. The couple remained friends, and Rose continued to live at Boleskine. Her alcoholism worsened, and as a result, she was institutionalized in September of 1911. In November of 1909, Crowley and Newberg traveled to Algeria, touring the desert from El Araba to Al-Maleh, Bau Sadah, then Daleh Adin, with Crowley reciting the Quran to fortify himself against growing feelings of awe and dread. During the trip, he invoked the 30 ethers of Enochian magic. This guy cannot decide on anything, right? This is just inconsistency all the way through. He's searching, but he never finds. Right? Then, quote, reciting the Quran and doing the 30 ethers of Enochian magic are counterintuitive to each other. And that is not to give any weight to the Quran whatsoever, right? It is much more flawed than the Bible is, and that is saying something. With Newberg recording the results, later published in the Equinox as The Vision and the Voice. Following a mountaintop sex magic ritual, Crowley also performed an evocation to the demon Corozon, involving blood sacrifice. And considered the results to be a watershed in his magical career. Well, everything's just going to go rosy from here. I bet that there's not going to be a period of brief success followed by extreme detriment. That's not going to be the outflow of this, right? Now, I have a small amount of knowledge about Mr. Crowley. It does not extend this far. I mean, we are learning things here that I didn't know. I'm willing to bet whatever that he is going to get a small measure of success, probably related to a multiple of 8, and then all of a sudden everything just goes terribly. Let's see what happens. Let's see if I'm right. Right. Sex magic automatically is a bad idea. Investment in the wrong way. Performing an evocation to a demon, again, bad. But anything involving a blood sacrifice is automatically, intrinsically evil. Right? If you are required to shed blood for it, the things that come out of it are not going to be beneficial. Not in the long run. Returning to London in January 1910, Crowley found that Mathers was suing him for publishing Golden Dawn secrets in the Equinox, and the court found in favor of Crowley. The case was widely reported in the place, with Crowley gaining wider fame. Crowley enjoyed this and played up to the sensationalist stereotype of being a Satanist, an advocate of human sacrifice, despite being neither. No. You do not, if you are not actually participating in human sacrifice, then you do not take credit for doing so, and you have just admitted that he does. Sacrifice does not mean death. Sacrifice means that something is given in order to achieve an end. He gave sex magic. That's a sacrifice, right? In a ritual. Stupid. He gave blood in a sacrifice. That would be human sacrifice. That's not killing someone. I understand that the interpretation of that is that there is somebody that died, but that is not necessarily true. You can sacrifice all kinds of things upon an altar. You can sacrifice the virginity of a person upon an altar. You can sacrifice the lifeblood on the altar. You can sacrifice various other elements as well. There are many things that you can sacrifice that do not result in death. Human sacrifice involves using human things. And so you could cut off a single finger, and that would be a sacrifice. You could cut yourself and give the blood. That can be a sacrifice. You can remove a teeth, hair, or a nail, and that would be a sacrifice. Any of those is a human sacrifice because it came from a human sacrificial target. And so, you have already admitted that you do indeed participate in sacrificial magic, right? And on top of that, you made a sacrifice of your blood to a demon, which implies that you are indeed aligned with satanic activities. There is no equivocation about that. You have participated in the activities directly associated with those things. And yes, you probably did indeed take great stature from that. But I'm willing to bet that it played out a little bit differently the farther along we get. Let's find out. The publicity attracted new members to the A Delta, among them Frank Bennett, James Bailey, Herbert Close, and James Windrum. The Australian violinist Leela Waddell soon became Crowley's lover. More balance, bring me all of the balance. Deciding to expand his teachings to a wider audience, Crowley developed the Rites of Artemis, a public performance of magic and symbolism featuring A Delta members personifying various deities. It was first performed at the A Delta headquarters, with attendees given a fruit punch containing peyote to enhance their experience. That is automatically going to be correctly aligned, right? Automatically drugging at a group of people, maybe without their knowledge, absolutely going to work. Various members of the press attended and reported largely positively on it. In October and November of 1910, Crowley decided to stage something similar, the Rites of Lucius, at Caxton Hall, Westminster. This time, press reviews were mixed. Crowley came under particular criticism from West DeWitt Fenton, editor of the Looking Glass newspaper, who called him one of the most blasphemous and cold-blooded villains of modern times. Fenton's articles suggested that Crowley and Jones were involved in homosexual activity. Crowley did not mind, but Jones unsuccessfully sued for libel. Fuller broke off his friendship and involvement with Crowley over the scandal, and Crowley and Newberg returned to Algeria for further magical workings. The Equinox continued publishing, and various books of literature and poetry were also published under its imprint, like Crowley's Ambergris, The Winged Beetle, and The Scented Garden, as well as Newberg's The Triumph of Pan and Ethel Archer's The Whirlpool. In 1911, Crowley and Waddell holidayed in Montigny-sur-Leon, where he wrote prolifically, producing poems, short stories, plays, and 19 works on magic and mysticism, including the 2 final books of Thelema. In Paris, he met Mary Dusty, who became his next Scarlet Woman, and with the 2 undertaking magical workings in St. Moritz. Crowley believed that one of the secret chiefs, Abuldiz, was speaking through her. Based on Dusty's statements when in trance, Crowley wrote the 2-volume Book 4, which is the book that we are doing this for, and at the time developed the spelling magic with a K in reference to the paranormal phenomenon as a means of distinguishing it from the stage magic of illusionists. Ordo Templi Orientis and the Paris Working, 1912 to 1914. In early 1912, Crowley published The Book of Lies, a work of mysticism that biographer Lawrence Sutin described as his greatest success in merging his talents as poet, scholar, and magus. The German occultist Theodor Reuss later accused him of publishing some of the secrets of his own occult order, Ordo Templi Orientis, within the book. Crowley convinced Reuss that the similarities were coincidental and the two became friends. Reuss appointed Crowley as head of OTO's British branch, the Mysteria Mystica Maxima, and at a ceremony in Berlin, Crowley adopted the magical name of Baphomet and was proclaimed ex degree Supreme Rex, or 10th degree, and Sovereign General Grand Master General of Ireland, Ionia, and all the Britons. Yet another name, and one definitely attached with some negative connotations. With Reuss's permission, Crowley set about advertising the MMM and rewriting many OTO rituals, which were then based largely on Freemasonry. His incorporation of the Thelemite elements proved controversial in the group. Fascinated by OTO's emphasis on sex magic, Crowley devised a magical working based on anal sex and incorporated it in the syllabus for those OTO members who were initiated into the 11th degree. I'm sure it's effective. In March 1913, Crowley acted as a producer for the Ragged Ragtime Girls, a group of 5 female violinists led by Waddell, and they performed at London's Old Tivoli Theatre. They subsequently performed in Moscow for 6 weeks, where Crowley had a sadomasochistic relationship with the Hungarian Annie Ringler. In Moscow, Crowley continued to write plays and poetry, including Hymn to Pan and the Gnostic Mass, a thelemic ritual that became a key part of OTO liturgy. Churton suggested that Crowley had traveled to Moscow on the orders of British intelligence to spy on revolutionary elements in the city. That almost certainly, right, the whole spy thing is almost certainly a narrative developed by adherents. Now, spies just don't act this way. In January of 1914, Crowley and Newberg settled into an apartment in Paris, where the former was involved in a controversy surrounding Jacob Epstein's new monument to Oscar Wilde. Together, Crowley and Newberg performed the 6-week Paris working, a period of intense ritual involving strong drug use in which they invoked the gods Mercury and Jupiter. As part of the ritual, the couple performed acts of sex magic together, at times being joined by journalist Walter Duranty. Inspired by the results of the working, Crowley wrote Liber Agape, a treatise on sex magic. Okay. Agape is a specific type of love, and it is not in any way, shape, or form related to sex. It is the beneficial love of a parent for a child, and for a child for the parent, the unconditional love of two people with no limitations. It has absolutely nothing to do with sex, much less magic. Following the Paris working, Newberg began to distance himself from Crowley, resulting in an argument in which Crowley cursed him. Well, that's going to be a wonderful fucking idea right there. Curse the person you were just performing magic with. United States, 1914 to 1919. By 1914, Crowley was living a hand-to-mouth existence. Color me shocked. I am completely surprised. I am flummoxed by this revelation. I had no idea whatsoever that all of his shit did work out terribly. I didn't know. I had no idea. Relying largely on donations from A Delta members and dues payments made to OTO. In May, he transferred ownership of Boleskine House to the MMM for financial reasons, and in July, he went mountaineering in the Swiss Alps. During this time, the First World War broke out. After recuperating from a bout of phlebitis, an inflammation of the vein, usually in the legs. Kind of like gout, I guess. Crowley set sail for the United States aboard the RMS Lusitania in October of 1914. Arriving in New York City, he moved into a hotel and began earning money writing for the American edition of Vanity Fair and undertaking freelance work for the famed astrologer Evangeline Adams. In the city, he continued experimenting with sex magic through the use of masturbation, female prostitutes, and male clients of a Turkish bathhouse. All these encounters were documented in his diaries. Professing to be of Irish ancestry and a supporter of Irish independence from Great Britain, Crowley began to espouse support for Germany in their war against Britain. He became involved in a New York's pro-German movement. Okay, when I made the statement earlier about the pro-German, I was thinking it was World War II. I was mistaken. That is a correction that I am making right here, right now, actively and loudly, right? I wasn't thinking World War I. I was thinking World War II. I was mistaken. And in January of 1915, pro-German propagandist George Sylvester Weyrich employed him as a writer for his propagandist paper, The Fatherland, which was dedicated to keeping the U.S. neutral in the conflict. In later years, detractors denounced Crowley as a traitor to Britain for this action. Crowley entered into a relationship with John Robert Foster, with whom he toured the West Coast. In Vancouver, headquarters the North American OTO, he met with Charles Stansfeld Jones and Wilford Talbot Smith to discuss the propagation of thelema on the continent. In Detroit, he experimented with peyote at Park Davis, then visited Seattle, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Los Angeles, San Diego, Tijuana, and the Grand Canyon, before returning to New York. That is a list of places that it is not cool to go to. At least in current times, right? Every single one of these places, at least in current times, is a shithole, right? Seattle, shithole. San Francisco, literal shithole. Los Angeles, shit on the streets. Santa Cruz, I got a little bit less knowledge about. But Tijuana is famous for some really terrible things. And so, like, with the exception of the Grand Canyon and possibly Santa Cruz, right, all of these places wound up pretty horrible, right? There is nothing redeeming about any. Seattle is a terrible place right now, currently. San Francisco and Los Angeles, San Diego, all of those are in California and therefore are intrinsically going to be making stupid decisions. But in particular, these places are really bad. There, he befriended Ananda Kumaraswamy and his wife, Alice Richardson. Crowley and Richardson performed sex magic in April of 1916, following which she became pregnant and then miscarried. Later that year, he took a magical retirement to a cabin by Lake Pasquaney, owned by Evangeline Adams. There, he made heavy use of drugs and undertook a ritual, after which he proclaimed himself Master Therian, yet another name. He also wrote several short stories based on James George Fraser's The Golden Bough, which is Irish mythology, and a work of literary criticism, The Gospel, according to Bernard Shaw. In December, he moved to New Orleans. Solid bet. I'm from just outside of Baton Rouge. I live about halfway between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. You can't pay me to go to New Orleans. His favorite U.S. city, before spending February 1917 with evangelical Christian relatives in Titusville, Florida. Returning to New York City, he moved in with an artist and a Delta member, Leon Ingers Kennedy, in May, learning of his mother's death. After the collapse of the Fatherland, Crowley continued his association with Weyrich, who appointed him contributing editor of the arts journal, The International. Crowley used it to promote thelema, but it soon ceased publication. He then moved to the studio apartment of Rhodey Minor, who became his partner and a Scarlet Woman. Through their rituals, which Crowley called the Amalantra workings, he believed they were contacted by a preternatural entity named Lamb. The relationship soon ended. This is Lamb over here on the side. He looks like a gray, don't he? In 1918, Crowley went on a magical retreat in the wilderness of Esopus Island on the Hudson River, where he began an adaptation of the Tao Te Ching, painted thelemic slogans on the riverside cliffs, and, he later wrote, experienced past life memories of being Gaizwan, Pope Alexander VI, Alessandro Caligstrio, and Eliphas Levi. Fucking awesome. Alright. I do believe that reincarnation is a thing. I don't know the mechanics of it. I do not claim to know the mechanics of it, but it is fairly certain that if by some miraculous chance you were one of these people, it is an exceedingly small chance that you were all of these people. Most of the people who recount their past lives do so from an influenced situation, i.e. hypnotism or drug use, and therefore are slightly subject to the influence of suggestion. On top of that, they are going into it with the expectation of coming out of it with an understanding that they were somebody famous, somebody that did something, right? Why would you want to go back and see that you were a potter in the 1400s, right? Who cares if you were a cobbler in the 1200s? And you didn't do anything big. It's much better to be Alexander the Sixth. It's much better to be Alessandro Caligstrio. It's much better to be Eliphas Levi. Are you fucking kidding me? Have you read Eliphas Levi? Eliphas Levi was an idiot. He was able to take other people's things and put them together in a way that is mildly entertaining if you don't pay any attention to the logic or reason or the actual practical applications of magic. And I don't say that lightly. I did the work. We read through Eliphas Levi where he pretty much told us that he didn't believe what he was writing, that he was actually a Catholic for the entirety of his life, and he might have been on a mission to subvert magical works. So naturally, that's who you're going to be the reincarnation of. Okay, fall back, watch Levi, see me tear that shit apart. Back in New York City, he moved to Greenwich Village, where he took Leah Hirsig as his lover and the next Scarlet Woman. He took up painting as a hobby, exhibiting his work at the Greenwich Village Liberal Club, and attracting the attention of the evening world. With the financial assistance of sympathetic Freemasons, Crowley revived the equinox with the first issue of Volume 3, known as The Blue Equinox. He spent mid-1919 on a climbing holiday in Montauk before returning to London in December. Abbey of Thelema, 1920 to 1923. Now destitute and back in London, Crowley came under attack from the tabloid John Bull, which labeled him traitorous scum for his work with the German war effort. Several friends aware of his intelligence work had urged him to sue, but he decided not to. Now, let's look here real quick. I'm going to pop out this footnote, see what we got. What was the number on that? 134. 134 is The Magic Life, a biography of Aleister Crowley. Do What Thou Wilt, a life of Aleister Crowley. Para de Ruabo, the life of Aleister Crowley. And Churton Tobias, Aleister Crowley, the biography. Now this one is the only one that sounds like that it might be a slight bit balanced, and I haven't read any of them, but most of the people who take up the work of biography are going to be sympathetic. Now that is not to say that all of them are, but most of them are, especially in this particular genre. And so it is entirely likely, as I have stated before, that this is a speculation that they have asserted as fact because it makes their guy look better. But there is absolutely nothing in his biography or his history that we have read so far that would lead me to believe that he was aligned correctly with anything, right? And that does indeed include patriotism. I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that he was a spy for England. When he was suffering from asthma, the doctor prescribed him heroin, to which he soon became addicted. I mean, he was already addicted to opium before, right? We've seen that. And yeah. In January of 1920, he moved to Paris, renting a house in Fontainebleau with Leah Hirsig. They were soon joined in a menage a trois by Nanette Shumway and also in living arrangement by Leah's newborn daughter, Anna Papalia. Crowley had ideas of forming a community of Thelemites, which he called the Abbey of Thelema, after the Abbaye de la Thelema and Francois Rabelais' satire Gargantua and Pantagruel. After consulting the I Ching, he chose Cefalù in Sicily as a location, and after arriving there, began renting the old Villa Santa Barbara as his abbey on 2nd April. Moving to the commune with Hirseg, Shumway, and their children, Hansi, Howard, and Poupée, Crowley describes the scenario as perfectly happy, my idea of heaven. They wore robes and performed rituals to the sun god Ra at set times during the day, also occasionally performing the Gnostic Mass. The rest of the day they were left to follow their own interest, undertaking widespread correspondences. Crowley continued to paint, wrote a commentary on the Book of the Law, and revised the third part of Book 4. He offered a libertine education for the children, allowing them to play all day and witness acts of sex magic. If I did not have anything else to completely fucking dismiss this guy, that's it. Right? There is nothing good about exposing children to sex. Nothing. Nothing beneficial comes from that at all. That is not to say that children should grow up and never know anything about sex, but there is never, ever any particular reason for you to be performing sex in front of a child, and if you do so, you are a horrible human being. He occasionally traveled Palermo to visit rent boys. What? Okay. That was not children. That's what I was in, a form of sex where consisting of the active practice of men providing sexual services in return for payment. So it's not children. I was about to really lose my shit. To visit rent boys and buy supplies, including drugs. His heroin addiction came to dominate his life, and cocaine began to erode his nasal cavity. It will do that. There was no cleaning rota, and wild dogs and cats wandered throughout the building, which soon became unsanitary. Poupée died in October of 1920, and Nanette gave birth to a daughter, Astarte Luthea Panthea, soon afterwards. New followers continued to arrive at the Abbey to be taught by Crowley. Among them was film star Jane Wolfe, who arrived in July of 1920, where she was initiated into the A Delta and became Crowley's secretary. Another was Cecil Frederick Russell, who often argued with Crowley, disliking the same-sex sexual magic that he was required to perform. So, in addition to all of the other bullshit, now we're adding rape. Because I don't care if it was just pressure, right? Exerting pressure and sexual influence for the goal of having sex with a person is rape, right? This is not consensual, right? There's nothing about this that intimates consensuality. He performed it because he thought it was a requirement from his superior, and this, however misguided that appellation is. And so this was coercive sex. This was rape. I am not surprised to find it at all, but I am, even seeing all the rest, I am disappointed to find it. More conducive was the Australian Thelemite Frank Bennett, who also spent several months at the Abbey. In February of 1922, Crowley returned to Paris for a retreat in an unsuccessful attempt to kick his heroin addiction. He then went to London in search of money, where he published articles in the English Review criticizing the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1920. Wait, you mean that a dangerous drug user was opposed to the Dangerous Drug Act? Oh my goodness, I'm surprised. And wrote a novel, The Diary of a Drug Fiend. There you go, claim that for yourself. Completed in July. On publication, it received mixed reviews. He was lambasted in the Sunday Express, which called for its burning and used its influence to prevent further reprints. Subsequently, a young Thelemite named Raoul Loveday moved to the abbey with his wife Betty May. While Loveday was devoted to Crowley, May detested him and life at the commune. She later said that Loveday was made to drink the blood of a sacrificed cat, and they were required to cut themselves with razors every time they used the pronoun I. One of the most powerful statements that you can make magically is I am. I have a whole video dedicated to it. It is the manifestation video. It is the means by which manifestation is facilitated at a minimum. The I am statements are what you claim for yourself. It is how you become. I am a teacher. I am a healer. I am a creator. I am a counselor. I am an employer. The I am is a very, very important statement. And again, I am not entirely surprised, but somewhat disappointed to find it here being prohibited. Loveday drank from a local polluted stream, soon developing a liver infection, resulting in his death in February of 1923. Do we know that it was the local polluted stream, or was it the unsanitary living conditions? Was it the various sexual proclivities happening in the area? Was it the heroin abuse? There are many things that can deliver a liver infection, and it did not have to be a stream. Returning to London, May told her story to the press. John Bull proclaimed Crowley the wickedest man in the world and a man we'd like to hang. And although Crowley deemed many of their accusations against him to be slanderous, he was unable to afford the legal fees to sue them. As a result, John Bull continued its attack, with its stories being repeated in newspapers throughout Europe and North America. The fascist government of Benito Mussolini learned of Crowley's activities, and in April of 1923 he was given a deportation notice, forcing him to leave Italy. Without him, the abbey closed. Kicked out yet again. Tunisia, Paris, and London, 1923 to 1929. Crowley and Hersig went to Tunis, where, dogged by continuing poor health, he unsuccessfully tried again to give up heroin. Balance, right? He is obviously a magical practitioner because, he is able to balance things. And began writing what he termed his autobiography, The Confessions of Aleister Crowley, a biography of a saint or an ecclesiastical leader, as well as, by extension, an adulteratory and idealized biography of a preacher, priest, founder, saint, monk, nun, or icon. They were joined in Tunis by the Thelemite Norman Mudd, who became Crowley's personal public relations consultant. If anybody needed PR, it was this guy. Employing a local boy, Mohammed bin Brahim, as his servant, Crowley went with him on a retreat to Nefta, where they performed sex magic together. Okay, there it is, pedophilia. We run the whole fucking gamut, right? We've got drug use, we've got blood magic, we've got rape, we've got sexual proclivities, and now we have pedophilia. Fucking awesome. This is absolutely a guy that people should be absolutely basing decisions upon. In January of 1924, Crowley traveled to Nice, France, where he met with Frank Harris, underwent a series of nasal operations, and visited the Institute for Harmonious Development of Man, and had a positive opinion of its founder, George Gurdjieff. Destitute, he took on a wealthy student, Alexander Zuzolar, before taking on another American follower, Dorothy Olson. Crowley took Olson back to Tunisia for a magical retreat in Nefta, where he also wrote to Man, a declaration of his own status as a prophet entrusted with bringing Thelema to humanity. After spending the winter in Paris, in early 1925, Crowley and Olson returned to Tunis, where he wrote The Heart of the Master, as an account of a vision he experienced in a trance. In March, Olson became pregnant and Hersig was called to take care of her. She miscarried, following which Crowley took Olson back to France. Hersig later distanced herself from Crowley, who then denounced her. According to Crowley, Roos named him head of OTO upon his death. but this was challenged by the leader of the German OTO, Heinrich Trenker. Trenker called the Hohenlohe Conference in Thuringia, Germany, which Crowley attended. There, prominent members like Karl Gamer and Martha Kunzel championed Crowley's leadership, but other key figures like Alvin Grau, Oscar Hopfer, and Henry Breven backed Trenker by opposing it, resulting in a split in OTO. Moving to Paris, where he broke with Olsen in 1926, Crowley went through a large number of lovers over the following years with whom he experimented in sex magic. Throughout, he was dogged by poor health, largely caused by his heroin and cocaine addictions. In 1928, Crowley was introduced to Israel Rigarde, a young Englishman who embraced Thelema and became Crowley's secretary for the next 3 years. That year, Crowley met Gerald York, who began organizing Crowley's finances but never became a Thelemite. He also befriended the journalist Tom Dryberg. Dryberg did not accept Thelema either. It was here that Crowley published one of his most significant works, Magic in Theory and Practice, which received little attention at the time. In December of 1928, Crowley met the Nicaraguan Maria Teresa Sanchez, Maria Teresa Ferrari de Miramar. Crowley was deported from France by the authorities, who disliked his reputation and feared that he was a German agent. But I thought he was a British agent. So that she could join him in Britain, Crowley married Sanchez in August of 1929. Now based in London, Mandrake Press agreed to publish his autobiography in a limited edition 6-volume set, also publishing his novel, Moonchild, and a book of short stories, The Stratagem. Mandrake went into liquidation in November of 1930, before the entirety of Crowley's Confessions could be published. I bet that is completely unrelated. I am sure that there were no negative connotations whatsoever attached to attaching yourself to this particular individual. Mandrake's owner, P.R. Stevenson, meanwhile wrote The Legend of Aleister Crowley, an analysis of the media coverage surrounding him. Berlin and London of 1930 to 1938. I think this is going to take us to the end. In April of 1930, Crowley moved to Berlin, where he took Henri Jaeger as his magical partner. The relationship was troubled. Imagine that. In September, he went to Lisbon in Portugal to meet the poet Fernando Pessoa. There, he decided to fake his own death, doing so with Pessoa's help at the Boca de Inferno rock formation. He then returned to Berlin, where he reappeared 3 weeks later at the opening of his art exhibition at the Gallery Neumann-Nierendorf. Crowley's paintings fitted with the fashion for German Expressionism. Few of them sold, but the press reports were largely favorable. In August of 1931, he took Bertha Busch as his new lover. They had a violent relationship and often physically assaulted one another. Complete balance. He continued to have affairs with both men and women while in the city, and met with the famous people like Aldous Huxley and Alfred Adler. After befriending him in January of 1932, he took the communist Gerald Hamilton as a lodger. Brilliant. Through whom he was introduced to many figures within the Berlin far left. It is possible that he was operating as a spy for British intelligence at this time, monitoring the communist movement, and I am sure that is recorded by people who were sympathetic. Crowley left Bush. There is no way an actual foreign agent is allowing himself to get thrown out of, 4 different countries now, or three different countries, but 4 different times? There's no way that he is engaged in acts that is going to allow him to do that as a covert agent. Crowley left Bush and returned to London, where he undertook Pearl Brooksmith as his new Scarlet Woman, undergoing further nasal surgery. It was here in 1932 that he was invited to be guest of honor at Foyle's Literary Luncheon, also being invited by Harry Price to speak at the National Laboratory of Psychical Research. In need of money, he launched a series of court cases against people whom he believed to have libeled him, some of which proved successful. He gained much publicity for his lawsuit against Constable & Company for publishing Nina Hamnet's Laughing Torso, a book he alleged libeled him by referring to his occult practice as black magic. but lost the case because you do practice black magic. Do not get that twisted at all, right? There is black magic, and everything that he has been described as doing is black magic. Sex magic, yes. Drug magic, yes. Blood magic, yes. All of it. Everything that he has done, every single instance so far has been black magic. Every single instance that has been recorded so far has been black magic. I am not surprised at all to see the results in his life. Right? I talked about the fruit at the beginning because I expected to find this. I didn't know this. I didn't know any of this. I expected to find it, though. The court case added to Crowley's financial problems, and in February of 1935, he was declared bankrupt. During the hearing, it was revealed that Crowley was spending 3 times his income for several years. Again, with the balance, right? Crowley developed a friendship with Deirdre Patricia Doherty. She offered to bear his child, who was born in May of 1937, named Randall Gare. Crowley nicknamed him Aleister Ataturk. He died in a car accident in 2002 at the age of 65. Crowley continued to socialize with friends, holding curry parties in which he cooked particularly spicy food for them. In 1936, he published his first book in 6 years, The Equinox of the Gods, which contained a facsimile of the Book of the Law and was considered to be Volume 3, Number 3 of the Equinox periodical. The work sold well, resulting in a second print run. In 1937, he gave a series of public lectures on yoga in Soho. Crowley was now living largely off of contributions supplied by OTO's Agape Lodge in California, led by rocket scientist Jack Parsons. Crowley was intrigued by the rise of Nazism in Germany and influenced by his friend Martha Kunzel, believed that Adolf Hitler might convert to Thelema. That was definitely a possibility. When the Nazis abolished the German OTO and imprisoned Gomer, who fled the U.S., Crowley then lambasted Hitler as a black magician. Second World War and death, 1939 to 1947. When the Second World War broke out, Crowley wrote to the Naval Intelligence Division offering his services, but they declined. He associated with a variety of figures in Britain's intelligence community at the time, including Dennis Wheatley, Roald Dahl, Ian Fleming, and Maxwell Knight. He wrote that he originated the V for Victory sign first used by the BBC. This has never been proven. In 1940, his asthma worsened, and with his German-produced medication unavailable, he returned to using heroin, once again becoming addicted. As the Blitz hit London, Crowley relocated to Torquay, where he was briefly admitted to hospital with asthma, and entertained himself with visits to the local chess club. Tiring of Torquay, he returned to London, where he was visited by American Thelemite Grady McMurdy, to whom Crowley awarded the title of Hymenius Alpha. He stipulated that though Germer would be his immediate successor, McMurtry should succeed Germer as head of OTO after the latter's death. With OTO initiate Leda Frida Harris, Crowley developed plans to produce a tarot card set designed by him and painted by Harris. Accompanying this was a book published in a limited edition as the Book of Teote by Chiswick Press in 1944. That is enlightening. I did not know that. That explains so very much. If you did not know, I am doing tarot these days. I am fairly comfortable with it. I use the Rider-Waite-Smith deck for reasons. I do not intentionally use the Teote deck for reasons, and that is that it is an unbalanced deck with no real reason to exist. The illustrations on them are senseless and nonsensical, right? Same thing, duh. Right? They don't have any point. They rely entirely upon the interpretation from the Rider-Smith-White deck. Right? If you have a knowledge of that deck, then you can use the Teote deck. But it is also something that I have noticed, right? I did an extensive research on tarot before I dove into it. I've got a whole video where I talk about it, right? The exploration of tarot, I think is what the playlist is called. No, I did like 4 videos before I ever even considered doing tarot. And one of the things I did was to independently corroborate the efficiency of it. And something that I noticed through the course of my observations was anyone that was using that particular deck was unbalanced in their readings almost every single time. The people using the Rider-Smith White deck were fairly consistent. And that is through experimentation that I've described. I'm not going to get into it again, but it was rather extensive. Anybody that I've found using this particular deck, however, seems to be a little bit unbalanced. And one of them recently made mention about the Rider-Smith White deck being the unbalanced one while using this particular deck. And I find that absolutely fucking hilarious. Especially knowing where it originated, because I don't know that anybody on the planet was less qualified to come out with a book of tarot. To aid the war effort, he wrote a proclamation on the rights of humanity, Liber, and a poem for the liberation of France, La Gauloisie. Crowley's final publication during his lifetime was a book of poetry, Allah, an anthology of 60 years of song. Another of his projects, Aleister Explains Everything, was posthumously published as Magic Without Tears. In April of 1944, Crowley briefly moved to Ashton Clinton in Buckinghamshire, where he was visited by the poet Nancy Cunard before relocating to Hastings in Sussex, where he took up residence at Netherwood Boarding House. He took a young man named Kenneth Grant as a secretary, paying him a magical teaching rather than wages. He was also introduced to John Symonds, whom he appointed to be his literary executor. Symonds thought little of Crowley, later publishing unfavorable biographies of him. Corresponding with the illusionist Arnold Crowther, it was through him that Crowley was introduced to Gerald Gardner, the future founder of Gardneria Wicca. They became friends, with Crowley authorizing Gardner to revive Britain's ailing OTO. This, if for no other reason, is a reason not to practice Gardnerian Wicca, right? Not knowing anything else about this particular sect of Wicca, the fact that it was through him that through Crowley that he developed that is enough to let me know not to follow it. They became friends, with Crowley authorizing Gardner to revive Britain's failing OTO. Another visitor was Eliza Marion Butler, who interviewed Crowley for her book, The Myth of the Magus. Other friends and family also spent time with him, among them Doherty and Crowley's son Aleister Ataturk. On 1 December 1947, Crowley died at Netherwood of chronic bronchitis aggravated by pleurisy and myocardial degeneration, aged 72. His funeral was held at a Brighton crematorium on 5 December. About a dozen people attended, and Lewis Wilkinson read excerpts from the Gnostic Mass, the Book of the Law, and Hymn to Pan. The funeral generated press controversy and was labeled a black mass by the tabloids, with good reason. Crowley's body was cremated. His ashes were sent to Carl Germer in the U.S., who buried them in his garden in Hampton, New Jersey. Alright, we will be going into Thelema in a secondary video, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this to an end, right? This was mainly about getting to know him. We will get his beliefs and thought as we get into Thelema and as we get into books 4, which is what we are here to do, right? Hopefully, I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult series of topics. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for. Understanding the balance and the use of practical magic is important to me because it is something that has quite literally changed my life. Not just because I have healed myself, but because I am balanced these days. I am much less likely to fly off the handle. I am much less likely to be subject to emotional whims. I have a perspective from the understanding that I have gained through the things that I describe here on this channel and in my book. The maintaining of that balance is what has allowed me to bring in these things in my life to manifest in very real ways healing and the fruits of the Spirit. There are chances that you will make mistakes when you are young, right? There is a chance that you will marry the wrong partner and you will require a divorce. That is an unfortunate circumstance in every single instance in which it happens, right? This was something that you made a vow, and a vow is a very important thing. It is you pledging your soul to another human being, and a breaking of a vow is a very big step. But there is the possibility when you are young and unbalanced that you will marry someone who is directly opposed to the betterment of you. That is one of the challenges that does unfold in life. I have family members who did that. It's part of my story. But if you are walking the walk that I describe, the path of balance which I lay out in this book, which I talk about on this channel every single day, one of the benefits that you get will be the balancing of your life. And you will come to the understanding that this person is not for you, and you will separate, but you will not become promiscuous, right? Even if for some horrible reason, and my wife was taken from me, and I don't want that to happen, I'm not speaking it into existence, but in the hypothetical, right? I'm not running out to go find a new sexual partner right away. It's just simply not going to happen. I may not ever have another sexual partner. And it's not because I don't like sex. It is because I made a commitment for my life to this woman, and she is the best woman on the planet. I'm not going to find another one that good. That's me being beneficial. But I didn't always view it that way. Right? When I was younger, I looked at it in a different light, and I'm not happy about that. I'm not proud of that. When I was young, I was a bit of a horn dog. I liked to throw the thing around, and while I never cheated on my wife physically, I could probably make the argument that it happened mentally several times over the course of our marriage. It is nothing that I ever acted upon in any way, shape, or form, right? I never vocalized to another person anything along those lines. It is not something that was part of me, but it was something that I thought about quite a bit. Right? This path of balance took that from me in very real ways. There are other imbalances as well, and what we see from the life as described here on the wiki of Mr. Aleister Crowley is that he did not have a balanced life for the entirety of his life. He had one very brief period of success, which, by the way, it's only he considered it a success, and it's not necessarily successful. But he had this one brief period that he considered to be a success after he performed this ritual sex magic involving bloods and demons. Well, that's the natural outflow from black magic, right? You get a small benefit. That's the fucking contract. And then you get detriment, right? It's not always death. Sometimes it is destitution, and that's exactly what he bore out. There is nothing in this at all that should be emulated. There is no single part of his entire life, other than possibly the mountaineering, right? And even that is laced with controversy. There is no part of his life that was beneficial to humanity. There is no part of his life that was beneficial to himself. He was his own worst enemy for the entirety of his life. He had no balance. He was not a magician, right? Even someone who is not a magician can perform energetic investment. You can do the rituals, no matter who you are. But if you do them and you don't understand them, you will reap rewards you did not expect. If you do them and you do understand them, you will still reap rewards you do not expect. Blood magic is a horrible idea. Horrible idea. It repercusses upon the practitioner every single time, and yes, we do have an example of that in real time. I'm not going to call his name again, but you know who I'm talking about if you are here, right? There is somebody I used to pay attention to that I do not anymore, and is because of this. Blood magic is unbalanced. Sex magic is unbalanced. Everything described in this is the exact wrong way to do it. You can do what you want. I am not here to convince you of anything. I'm here to tell you about several things. Some of those things are meant to lead you to balance. They piss you off, and if they piss you off, it is because you are unbalanced. And if you get mad because I'm talking shit about this guy, you are unbalanced. If you were idolizing this guy and you knew this shit, you're definitely unbalanced. There is nothing to be emulated about his life at all. Every single part of this was fucking terrible. And that's where I'm going to wrap it up. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment if you agree or disagree. Put it in the box, and if it remains respectful, it gets remain up. I have to say that because Crowley's believers are probably going to come and flame me, and I am fine with that. Feed my algorithm. It is good. I told you at the beginning I was going to piss you off. I'm sure I did, right? I'm sure that if you believe in Mr. Crowley, you are mad. If you really like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me, I did that, right? If you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book where I teach you to do magic responsibly. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt Steak. Peace.